The RTX 4060 is one of the most popular GPUs right now in the Steam hardware survey. Yes, it was hated by the tech tubers when it was released because it only had 8GB of VRAM. However, we have a new contender, boys, the RX 9060 XT 16GB. Is this a good upgrade option if you have the RTX 4060? Brother, that RTX 4060 ain't got no chance with our RX 9060 XT 16GB, bro. You know it, man. No chance. Nah. We'll see about that, because the RTX 4060 is one of the most power efficient cards. So let's see, let's do some tests, right? Let's compare both of these cards into a lot of our games. And we're going to be using, once again, our Ryzen 7600 for this test, because this is a budget card series. We're not going to be using our 9800 X3D. That's unrealistic. Yes, it's good for theory, but it's unrealistic. Okay, let's move on to our first game. CyberPunk 2077, boys. Boom. First blood, bro. 51% better with our RX 9060 XT compared to the RTX 4060. 22% better on the load. However, here's the kicker. Once again, if you look at the frame times, the RX 9060 XT has micro status compared to our RTX 4060. And this is sort of like an issue for CyberPunk 2077. Yes, the numbers do tell that it looks good. However, those micro status, boy, those micro status, something to look at. So let's move on to 1440p with upscalers. Bang! 28% better in average FPS, but look at the frame times again. Like, look at the frame times. The more erratic the frame times are, the more that you will feel those status. But in this case, it's just micro status. A lot of it. Let's move on to our next game. Oblivion Remastered. 1080p and the RX 9060 XT is 32% better in the terms of the average FPS compared to the 4060. However, on the lows, it did lose. This is 1080p and it's a lot of micro status there with our RTX 4060. We're pushing 6GB of VRAM, 6.6GB of VRAM in here. Let's see how we go with 1440p. Bang! 1440p with upscalers in here, and the RX 9060 is still 27% better compared to the RTX 4060. Yes, this game is a stutterfest because it's Unreal Engine 5. But hey, a win is a win, right? The RX 9060 is definitely better here compared to the 4060. Let's move on to the games we're in. We need really high FPS because it's competitive. And first up is Warzone for our COD bros. Look at that one, boys. 1080p basic, no upscalers in here, and the RX 9060 XT is only 12% better compared to the RTX 4060. And that's because we are once again just CPU bottleneck in here. We are not bottleneck with our GPU. Oh, look at that one. When we go to the firing benchmark, the lead actually becomes smaller. Okay, let's go to 4040p with upscalers. On our running benchmark, yeah, still about 40% lead. Not much though, right? 180, 189 against 165. And oh, one more thing to consider in here, boys, is that with our RX 9060, the GPU power is about like 170 watts compared to about 115 watts on the 4060. So there's a bit of power difference there. But you do get that higher performance as well. And our firing benchmark, it did get better for our RX 9060 That's 18% better now compared to the 4060. And boys, before we proceed, if you like these type of videos, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us a lot, and I mean that. Okay, let's move on. Delta Force 1080p and RX 9060 is 34% better compared to the RTX 4060. Wow. And yes, we are both GPU bottleneck in here. Let's go to our firing benchmark and bang, right? 224 against 160. That's pretty clear there. Pretty clear, bro. When we go to 1440p with upscalers, FSR2 on the RX 9060 and bang, our RX 9060 is still 29% better compared to the RTX 4060. When we go to the firing benchmark, it's the same thing, right? 32% better. So that's about like 200 FPS against 150 FPS. That's still like a 50 FPS difference there, boys. Let's move on to PUBG, right? On our running benchmark, that's 350 FPS against 260 FPS. So about 31% better average FPS with our 9060 and about like 36% better on in terms of the lows. When we go to our firing benchmark, yeah, about 23% better average FPS and about like 40% better on the 1% lows, right? 260 against 215. Let's move on to 1440p because this game actually favors like higher resolution if you want like a visibility advantage against, because this game actually requires situational awareness, right? So on our running benchmark, we're getting about 28% better average FPS compared to our 4060. Once again, 250 against about like 200 FPS with a 4060. On our firing benchmark, yeah, that's still like a lead here for our RX 9060 XT, 21% better compared to 4060. The lows still got that 40%, 42% lead compared to the 4060. Okay, let's move on to our hero shooters. First up is Apex Legends. On our heavy action benchmark, boom, look at that one, boys. The RX 9060 XT is able to hit that maximum FPS in here. And on the static scenes, it's still better, right? Although it has better performance on that heavy action benchmark. Let's move up to the 1440p. And once again, 9060 XT still has that lead over the 4060, 37% better average FPS and only about 16% better on the lows, right? It's still better. On the static scenes, same thing, right? 35% better on the FPS and 25% better on the lows. On the power consumption, we're both the same here, 170 before against 115. Let's move on to Marvel Rivals. Bang, look at that one, boys. 150 FPS against 130 FPS. That's a huge difference there, right? About like 130 against 110, 100. Oh, that's about 30% difference in terms of average FPS and about like 40% difference in terms of the lows. No contest, no contest. Let's move on to 1440p with upscalers. FSR 4 on the RX 9060 XT and DLSS on our RTX 4060. Now, both of these cards have 1 to 8-bit bus. So yeah, it should, yeah, well, they're both designed for 1080p, but we're using it for 1440p in here, and you're getting about 16% better average FPS with our RX 9060 XT. Yes, the lead is much smaller, but hey, it's still better. It's still better compared to the 4060. Okay, let's move on to our PvE games. Helldivers 2 on our Gatling benchmark, you're getting about 120 FPS against about 112 FPS, 100 FPS. So that's about like, yeah. And our strategy, that's about 18% better, right? 18% around there. 80% better average FPS. And on our stratagem benchmark, yeah, we're getting definitely much higher performance on the RX 9060 XT, 23% better. Right, let's move on to 1440p. Boom. Look at that one. 17% better average FPS compared to the 4060. The power is still the same, right? 170 against about 115 watts. The stratagem benchmark, it's the same story here. Yep. You're still getting much better performance here with the 9060 XT. Let's move on to Path of Exile 2, which dropped a big update like late last month. And we're getting like some key difference in here. AMD has finally picked up their game. They used to suck in Path of Exile 2. Now it's much better, right? You're getting better performance now with AMD because finally, but 14% better now on the average FPS compared to our 4060. Let's go to 1440p. Now we did use FSR and DLSS in here, but we didn't use upscaling, right? We maintained the same native resolution, but we just use those FSR and DLSS for like anti-aliasing. In this scenario, boys, the RX 9060 XT is still the winner here. 40% better average FPS. I am really glad that AMD finally fixed this thing. Finally. Yeah, bro. Those bug reports, I think I sent like more than 10, bro. Yeah, I think we did it very well for the community. So congratulations if you made one of those bug reports to AMD. Oh, just 9 months later, right? Okay, if you look at it overall at 1080p, you are getting about 25% better average FPS with our RX 9060 XT 16GB and about like 21% on the lows, 1% lows, and 28% on the 0.1% lows. When we move up to 1440p, it's actually more or less the same. At average FPS is about like 24% better. 1% lows is 23% better with our RX 9060 XT. And on the 0.1% lows, it's still about like 29% better, right? So if you look at it, you've got a 4060 right now. The good points of the 4060 is actually power efficiency, right? You're getting only about 115 watts on that thing compared to about 170 watts on our RX 9060 XT 16GB. If you value power consumption, maybe it's worth holding on to your 4060. The trade-off is that you are getting about at least 20% gains with the RX 9060 XT 16GB, and you do have that 16GB of VRAM. So those are the things that you'll have to weigh in. If you ask me which one is better, once again, if you value efficiency and you're just a 1080p gamer, the 4060 is just fine. You'll be fine. If you want peace of mind, thinking that you actually need that assurance that you'll have enough VRAM for future games, then the RX 9060 XT is definitely worthwhile. Yes, you do have to pay more, but it's worthwhile. You can sell the 4060 for about $240 at eBay or in your used marketplace, and you'll need to fork out about like $120 to get that RX 9060 XT. But what do you think?